star of the show, and they never had a problem, they never failed, they never sinned, they never did anything wrong, we would know that it was made up. It would be like a fairy tale. But these are stories of real people who stumble in the Spirit. And I'm going to mention a few of these guys the next couple of weeks, just to kind of show you what I'm talking about. Because I want you to see that even though, which most all of us do, God still restores them and sets them back on the right path because they submit to God. And He turns, as they say, their message into a message for the rest of us. A perfect example, as we saw during the Easter season and subsequent to that, was Peter. You know, we thought Peter was the man. He seems like he's the man in Scripture, but he loses it right then when Jesus gets arrested. The first thing he does is freak out and start saying, I don't know him, and all this kind of thing. And you think of all people, Peter wouldn't do that, but he does. So this morning, I want to go back and look at a guy from the Old Testament named Elijah. Elijah was more than just some average guy. He was a true prophet of God. He wasn't a made-up prophet. And you would think that of all the people you read about in this Bible, a true prophet of God wouldn't stumble. He'd have it kind of worked out and everything, but that's not the case with Elijah. And I want to share with you some of his story. But let me set it up before I get to the Scripture. In 1 Kings 17, there's this guy named Elijah, the Tishbite, which was that's where he was from. Today, that would be considered Jordan, if you're familiar with the Middle East. And he was called out by God to serve him in the time of Ahab, king of Israel, which is about 869 BC. So that's kind of the time frame he's living in. And I'm going to set up this story. God tells Elijah to go, because Ahab's losing his mind, and he's worshiping idols and all that kind of stuff, and predict a severe drought. And, of course, it happens because God said so. And he's doing ministry. Elijah's still doing ministry even after he, talks about the drought. And he meets this widow, and he's like, hey, I need some bread and some water. She don't have anything. So I got a little bit of oil, a little bit of flour in the bottom of the pot. She goes, but whatever, we'll make it and we'll die together. Elijah says, don't worry about the water, the oil and the flour in the pot. He goes, because for the next 3 years, during this drought and during this famine, you will always have oil and you'll always have flour, and she does. Now, some people might think that's a made-up story. I've seen it happen. There's some in this room that have seen it happen. Remember when we used to do ministry down at the homeless shelter before we started giving food away every month? We were there one time, and we had hot dogs. We were giving away hot dogs, and we're serving out the pot. I know we only had about 200 maybe. And we served everybody. I look out the gate, and the line's all the way out, if you've ever been over there, from the back of the facility all the way out the fence into the street. I'm like, we ain't got enough food. But I told him, I said, keep serving. Just keep, y'all. Some of y'all remember this? Like, keep serving. And I didn't look in the pot either. Because I told him, I'm not looking in the pot. I just like, I bet we served 500 people. I don't know how it happened. I'm like, I guarantee you that there was not 500 hot dogs in that pot. But we did. And it happened more in Wentz down there. We just never ran out as we were feeding the multitudes in a sense. So I know this is a true story that Elijah can do things like this. Same thing that Jesus did when he did the loaves and the fishes that we talked about last week. Over the time, the lady, it happens in the 3 years, the son dies. And she's kind of tripping, and Elijah says, don't worry about that. He comes in, and he prays over this kid and brings him back to life. So this is kind of the power that Elijah worked in. And these weren't the only things he did. This is just a couple.